So the Steam machines are coming. Hopefully it'll be here in January of 2026. And that, well, everybody's going to be able to experience this. And it's available at a good price. That's my hope. And I think it's going to happen. But what I want to talk about today is, well, probably the bigger plan that Valve has and how this could shake up multiple industries all at the same time. Because as everyone knows, when they think about Steam or Valve in general, they think about gaming because that's what they built their entire business on, is gaming, specifically with PC gaming. However, with Valve's next strategy or their overall long-term plan, it's much more than just gaming. And it all has to do initially with the operating system. So SteamOS is a Linux-based, Arch-based Linux operating system. And basically, it is an alternative to gaming on Windows and to a lesser extent macOS and even Android, because people do play games on Android as well. But it's really about Microsoft Windows. And they made the first huge step with the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is something that I think all of us have really grown to love and has had really huge successes. And in my opinion, I still think it's the best all around handheld, and mainly because the entire experience. However, the Steam Deck isn't just a handheld gaming device because, as I think most people know, you could get a Steam Deck docking station, and then from this, you could actually use it as your operating system, your desktop operating system, where you could connect it and do your computing on much larger screens. And it's all done through SteamOS. And that is really the overall big plan that Valve has. And that's where I think every company wants to go. And at the end of the day, it's really not about the operating system, but it's about the entire platform, the whole Valve Steam platform. Because at the end of the day, what they really want, and I think what every company wants, is to be the platform of choice. To where no matter where you're doing your computing or gaming, you are going to be using their service. Okay, so that's where I think all these companies want to go. And for the longest time, it's been primarily Microsoft Windows and then Apple Mac. But Valve is really, really going to shake up the industry in multiple ways. And gaming is that Trojan horse that brings people into gaming, which they're already familiar with Valve and the Steam services. But then, as they discover through the Steam machine that you could actually use this as your primary computing device with desktops and then later on with laptops, it's going to really change the game. Because if it's anything similar to the entire experience that people are already getting with the Steam service, meaning that it's really customer focused, giving you a really great experience, I think the best experience definitely for a gaming platform. If they could do something similar for an operating system, which I think they have already started, and that there's a lot of support and compatibility for a lot of software that people use. And I think, for the most part, a lot of software that you use are multi-platform. So I have been using Linux, specifically Linux Mint. I've been using Linux for more than 15 years. And this allows me to do basically 95 to 98% of all my computing that I need. Now, I still do have Windows running in a virtual machine and also dual boot for things that need Windows, but it's not very often. And I think for the vast majority of people, once they discover something other than Microsoft Windows or Apple Mac, and they could get things like the operating system is free, they're really going to start to see a big difference. Especially now with modern Windows, I think most people hate the experience. I've hated Microsoft Windows for a long time. But as you log in, you're constantly getting marketing. Why do I need to see this stuff? Or they have the Copilot stuff already on, or OneDrive. And then when it comes to data collection, wow, they collect a ton of data. A ton of data. Most of it is by default. And they're constantly collecting data and marketing to you all the time. You know, I really don't need all this marketing on here practically everywhere. And even though you could turn off things, Microsoft is always finding ways to turn things back on or add new ways to collect your data and market and sell to you constantly. And still to this day, Windows is still absolutely horrible. I never know when an update's going to break something. You know, it was way worse back in the day, but now, I don't know, including all this tracking, marketing and stuff, I think it's even a worse experience. So for me, I'm hopeful that a lot of people will discover an alternative, a better alternative. And thanks to the Linux operating system mainly, but what Valve is doing with their platform, I think people are going to discover this on a mass scale. And for anybody who's been using Linux for a long time, we've always talked about the year of Linux, and I'll probably make a separate video on that. But this is it. It's the year of Linux, but it's more like the year of the Steam platform. And if you are somebody who uses Linux, then you probably know there's many different versions of Linux available. So this is Bazite, which is a Linux distribution that is made for gaming. Okay, so right now, I think this is the most popular Linux-based gaming distro or version right now. Because SteamOS, most people don't use it as their desktop or laptop operating system. Okay, but as SteamOS rolls out more and more, I have a really good feeling that it's going to be one of the most downloaded and used Linux distro operating systems out there, other than Microsoft Windows and Apple Mac. That's my belief, because the difference with SteamOS versus any other Linux distro is they have a multi-billion-dollar company behind it who is really willing and ready to spend the money to make sure that this is a success. So that is good for practically everybody involved. And so, yeah, the year of Linux will be coming, but for different reasons. And most importantly, we have another alternative to Microsoft Windows, to Apple Mac. And more people will discover, at least from a technical point of view, the wonderful world of Linux. But I'm more interested and more happy that we'll finally have another choice. And hopefully this choice will be the right one for a lot of people, and Valve continually improves things.